Hydration drinks have become a popular choice since landing on South Africa's shelves. Prime includes a range of sports drinks, mixes and energy drinks from Prime Hydration LLC. Now, this range is promoted by controversial YouTubers Logan Paul and KSI. The current buzz leaves many unanswered questions as consumers dig deep to score one. Let's unpack this now and the healthiness of it all. We're joined by Dietitian Nathalie Mat. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon and for joining us in studio. Tell us a little bit about this big buzz around Prime and the confusion around its benefits or no benefits.
That is an excellent question. So what we see a lot is that children... Oh, I must pick it up and show. I came prepared. So what we're seeing, there are two kinds of Prime energy drinks or Prime drinks. One of them is caffeinated and it is not this one. So if your children are drinking something in a can, that is a highly caffeinated drink, much more than a cup of coffee. And it's really for something that seems the kids are mostly interested in. You don't want children drinking. What is much more affordable and available in the shops, much more easily to get our hands on, is Prime Hydration, and that is the example of what I've got here. I have not tasted it yet, but there was so much marketing buzz around it. I wanted to see what it's about. And a lot of the claims that are being made, they've got these little like health halo little goals on the side, are talking about things like branched chain amino acids and added vitamins and minerals. But when I as a dietitian look a little bit closer, they're in a really unusual kind of formulation or mix that I can tell this has not been developed. It doesn't feel like it's been developed by a health professional. And especially for children, some of the doses of our fat-soluble vitamins, like vitamin A or vitamin E, are more than we would really want children to be consuming in a drink. And I would definitely not be recommending that they're drinking more than one in a day, because we need food to get our vitamins and minerals from. This is also an electrolyte drink. So some people might go, oh, it's low in sugar, it's a great option. Now, if you're an athlete or a sports dietitian, you'll know that actually when we are performing on a sports field, we want some easy to digest carbohydrates. And that's where some of your other kind of Powerade or Energade, those sports drinks are aimed. This is not a sports drink. It does not have enough nutrition in it to really boost performance while you're playing on the field. So maybe you're using it afterwards to kind of up your electrolytes, in which case it can be useful, but you don't want to drink multiples of these in a day. Also, the mix of electrolytes is quite unusual. It's very high in potassium, and potassium is a wonderful electrolyte that helps to drop our blood pressure. But if you are on high blood pressure medication, you don't want to be taking in an excessive amount, because it can actually be contraindicated for heart health.
That's very interesting that you say the mix of the drink doesn't seem as though it was put together by a health professional. So would you say then that the concerns of a school group, I think it's Curo, that recently said the Prime drink is banned from their school, the children cannot be drinking it, those concerns by the school are valid?
I think it's quite responsible what they have done, in part because, as I mentioned, the fat-soluble vitamins, vitamin A and vitamin E, are in high doses that if a child drinks more than one a day, they've got their maximum for the day. They don't need more, and so the risk of toxicity is higher. And then also nutrients like magnesium, which are in quite a nice amount for an adult. For a child's body, drinking more than one of these could actually lead to a runny tummy. And so it's not a harmless product. It has certain nutrients in amounts that could actually cause a bit of complications. And so this isn't like, oh, it's sugar water, it's okay. And in fact, there is very little sugar in here. The naturally occurring sugars come from coconut water, and then the drink is artificially sweetened. And I don't feel that children need to be drinking artificially sweetened drinks.
I mean, they also did indicate that they found that the children's behavior had also altered after having the drink. So one would assume that they were probably having more than one bottle at the time. Apart from the diarrhea, all of the other components that you've just mentioned are contained within the drink. Could they cause any other effects to kids who would have more than one?
So from my reading, from what I understand, I think there is so much hype around this bottle that a lot of it might actually be placebo. There isn't caffeine inside these. There aren't stimulants inside these. But people are incredibly excited to be drinking them. And I think as a result, they might be feeling like I've had something super awesome. But we know generally from randomized clinical control trials that most children do not have wild reactions to sugar itself. There are some children who are sensitive to colorants. There are some children who are sensitive to additives. But I think there might be quite a lot of marketing hype that's actually altering children's behavior when drinking this.
Yeah. So you did say you have never tasted it, but you bought it because of the hype.
Yes.
I'm going to ask you to taste it for our audience and give us a sense of the taste and your view. I'm sure this is probably not the first hydration drink you would have had before.
So
that wasn't a great initial.
I tried this flavor because someone had said this one is the best, and this is called the blue raspberry flavored drink. It's very sweet. It's very sweet. And one of the things about drinking a lot of artificially sweetened things is that when you get used to drinking something that tastes this sweet, a banana is going to taste positively boring next to it.
Yeah.
And so I do not like the use of excessive artificial sweeteners because it blunts your own appreciation of the natural flavor of food. And this, next to blueberries, is incredibly sweet, and it might kind of upregulate your desire for super sweet, super flavorful foods. So for me, just having tasted this is a sometimes drink. It's not an everyday drink. I would encourage children and parents to really focus on hydrating with water most of the time. The energy version of this, which is incredibly high in caffeine, I would not recommend for children at all. And that, because of the price tag, would obviously be a much less common occurrence in any case.
Yeah, and of course, artificial sweeteners aren't necessarily very healthy either. They've got their negative effects as well. Perhaps you could just explain those to us.
So apart from upregulating that sweet craving, what we know happens with some people, one for you too, we know what happens with some people is that they're sensitive, their digestive systems might be sensitive to certain artificial sweeteners. So for example, sucralose has recently come out as potentially damaging our gut microbiome, the gut bacteria, but also people who have IBS might be very sensitive to sugar alcohols, which can be fermented by our gut bacteria and actually cause quite a lot of bloating and discomfort. So while we might be trying to reduce sugar, a little bit of sugar is unlikely to upset your digestive system. And especially when you're doing it, taking some sugar in the context of physical activity, it's really not a problem.
Yeah. So you're telling parents to give their children water. No child wants to hear that at all. No. And I've seen, I'm sure you would have too, at your local pharmacy, these flavoring drops that you can just put a couple of drops to flavor the water. So a lot of innovative things are coming up to make children eat and drink more healthily. But I'm just thinking, are those things necessarily better for the body to encourage a child to drink a glass of water, to just pour a couple of drops of a flavored liquid that you would find at your local pharmacy? And while you give us that answer, I'm going to taste my Prime. I've just got one ice pop. I'll give it a try now. But maybe you could just explain these innovative ways that are coming up to encourage children to eat and drink a little healthier.
So I don't feel we need to fool children into eating their veggies in hidden things. I don't feel that we need to kind of hide stuff or enhance stuff. We want to raise competent eaters and competent adult eaters who need to, at this age now, get used to drinking water and get used to eating veggies and eating fruit. And so from my perspective, you want to raise a child who's going to maintain this way of eating for the rest of their lives, and you as the parent create the eating environment. So you go, this is what's for breakfast, this is what's for lunch, this is what's for dinner, and leave it. That is called eNCA's division of responsibility of feeding, and it's a way of creating a lower stress environment. What it does assume is that you have a child that doesn't have, say, isn't on the spectrum or doesn't have tactile defensiveness. So in an environment where a child doesn't have any kind of learning ability or sensory difficulties, that child should be able to drink water and eat normal food and shouldn't require prompting. They should be able to answer their thirst signals. They should be able to feed themselves. And so I would say parents need to provide an environment that is a balanced environment that you want your children to maintain as adults, and then the children can choose out of what is available, what they will take. And I do think there is space for sometimes diluting some juice, but it doesn't need to be a super artificially
quite sweet, isn't it?
It's very, very sweet. When I say it, I was like, that's a lot of sweetness. And so you could even dilute this to get a bit of flavor, to have something that's a little bit different, but that's still a sometimes drink. It's a fun drink, but it's still a sometimes drink.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned the change or the altering in bodily functions based on what they consume, and that they have to learn quite early before they get to adulthood, so that those alterations don't happen. But I'm thinking it's also probably got to do with nutrition, taking care of the actual body. The huge issues of obesity or being underweight, and if you don't understand the kind of food your body needs, then you're prone to fall victim to fads. I'll call it the fads of this nature.
One of the things that I'm amazed by is people think children can eat completely differently to adults, and at some point they'll turn into adults who eat well. And ideally we should have children from the age of 5 eating in an adult manner, just smaller portions. So if the family all uses full cream milk that is unsweetened, or they just use plain yogurt, aim for 5. That's when your child should be eating similar stuff. And I know some parents right now are going, what? But you can start making small changes. Your child doesn't need to eat a different meal to you. They should hopefully be eating the same meal as you. And when parents and children eat together, that is where children see, oh, it is normal for an adult to drink water with their meal. They don't have to have a boxed juice or a fizzy something. And what I find parents find scary about that is it puts a lot of pressure on parents to then model the behavior they want their children to engage in. And the truth is, children do as we do. They do what we see, not as we say. And so it's really important that we model those behaviors for our children. And if you're drinking multiple primes a day, which even for adults I wouldn't recommend, your kids are going to do the same, or want to.
Yeah, I want to talk about eating trends that have come over the few years as we acknowledge things of climate change. And so, I mean, you're a dietitian, so I'm going to take every opportunity I can to address all these things. Veganism and the like, and parents introducing their children. I've seen toddlers on Instagram that are a year old that are vegans already. How healthy is that for a child, and what exactly are the benefits, if any, to be introducing children to these alternative forms of eating?
When it comes to being a vegan toddler or a vegan infant, it can be done, but it should be done in conjunction with a dietitian, because this is a very critical period of your life where you're growing incredibly quickly. And in South Africa, we don't have access to a huge amount of fortified foods. And so it requires supplementation with vitamin B12, and you might find some of the children's protein sources are going to be unacceptable for young kids because they're like too high in salt, for example. But you can be a vegan infant and you can be a vegan toddler with planning and with some supplementation, because iron is very important and vitamin B12 is very important. That means that when you get older, you can also be a vegan child. But I must say that in my families that I see where there is a vegan mom or a vegan dad, often the kids are vegetarian, or they might even eat a little bit more meat or fish or dairy, because it's easier from a socialization perspective. And so you might find at birthday parties and things like that, they kind of say it's a little bit easier just so that the child can eat the same food as everyone else. I think raising aware children is wonderful, and I think reducing the impact that we make is a great thing to do, but I also think a child should be allowed to choose. And so when a child is able to choose, if they express a desire to try some cheese or to eat some scrambled eggs, that the parent mustn't ideally say, no, you can't. Let the child have some autonomy as well in making this decision, and allow them to taste some of these foods. And especially if you're not using them all the time, you're still making a difference on the impact that this child will have at a carbon emission perspective. If all of us, I am a little bit of a hippie at heart, so there is my bias. If all of us ate 1 or 2 plant-based meals a week. And that doesn't mean eating fake plant products. It can mean eating a bean curry. We would all reduce our carbon emissions quite significantly.
Yeah, and I suppose the last word from you is that you cannot replace wholesome food and drink with these artificial fads that are created and brought into the market.
Absolutely. These are supplements. Food should be the first thing.
Thank you very much for joining us in studio, Nathalie Mat there, a dietitian engaging us on this huge trend around Prime, but also child nutrition and things that parents should be aware of when feeding their children and how they should be feeding their children, making them aware eaters.